I'd first of all like to thank everyone, myself, for joining us today. This is a great opportunity for all of us to learn a little bit more about the Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center. Obviously, I would say you have some sort of connection already with the Cancer Center because you're here today. But hopefully you'll learn some more today about some of the discoveries being made in our cancer medicine area and cutting-edge therapies, treatments, and clinical trials that thousands of Iowans take advantage of every year. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Our first one is Dr. George Weiner, who is the director of the Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center. His research focuses on developing new research approaches to immunotherapy of lymphoma. I've had an opportunity to share some thoughts with Dr. Weiner. I'm going to refer to him as George today. I've been given permission to refer to him that way in previous encounters and some previous seminars, and I appreciated that. We also have with us today Dr. Adam Dupay, sorry, who is an associate professor of anatomy and cell biology at Iowa. His research focuses on understanding how somatic, I can't wait for you to tell me what that means, somatic mutation impacts all aspects of tumor biology. And our third panelist for today is Jordan Hawk, who is going to bring us a different perspective today. He is going to bring us the perspective of a patient who has benefited by the wonderful work done by the Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center. And because of the care he received there, Jordan is now cancer-free. So let's start our conversation today by visiting with our panelists today with a couple of questions. Let's start with the connection with the University of Iowa. George, we'll start with you. Where are you from, and how did you end up getting involved with the University of Iowa?
Well, I was born in New York. I finished my high school in Ohio. And my first job was here at the University of Iowa over 30 years ago. So I tell people I was born in Iowa, and I just didn't know it until I was about 30 years old. I came here because of the university and the hospital. I wanted to both practice medicine and do cancer research. And I looked at medical centers around the country. And while I never expected I would land in the middle of the Midwest, I thought the opportunities here were the best. And 30 years later, I still feel that they were.
That's a wonderful testimonial. Thank you. Adam, how about you? Where are you from? And how did you end up getting involved with the University of Iowa?
Well, for me, it's a much simpler story. I was born here, actually. I was born in Des Moines and grew up in a small town west of Des Moines called Earlham, Iowa, near the bridges of Madison County, out near Winterset. I went to a very small school at Earlham High School. I think I had 26 other students in my class. So I had no idea what science was, what research was. I went to college at Central College in Pella, Iowa. And there is where I really started to really consider getting into a research career. Went on to do my graduate training at the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities, and then did a postdoctoral fellowship at the National Cancer Institute in Maryland. At that stage, I looked all over the country really for faculty positions. And after really looking around at some outstanding institutions, I decided that the University of Iowa really was the best fit for me for a whole host of reasons, which maybe we can talk about later. But I came here in 2006 as an assistant professor and got promoted with tenure in, somewhere after that. And I've been doing running my research program here ever since.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your connection with the University of Iowa and how you got here?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in north central Iowa, small town, kind of like Adams. Graduated with 28 kids, but grew up on a farm. Livermore, Iowa is a town for you football fans. It's the home of Dallas Clark. So yeah, I've lived down here, and I currently live in Huxley, so just south of Ames, between Ames and Ankeny. back in 2013, I was actually diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma. And I could talk about that later, but that's kind of how I got connected to the U of I. I didn't like my options locally, and kind of advocated for myself and found there was better options in Iowa City, with kind of, cutting edge research and clinical trials that gave me a better opportunity to be here today. And here I am, cancer free since 2014.
That's tremendous. Tremendous. I'll just make a comment about my journey to the University of Iowa. As Tony did mention, I have a connection. My partner was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in the fall of 2011. And his first doctor, who was not at the University of Iowa, let's put it this way, bedside manner was not his strong suit. And so Herb decided right away he was going to go to the University of Iowa, and was very happy to be there. He got excellent care. He had a great relationship with his doctor, which if you knew Herb, you'd say, good luck with that. Anyway, it was a great experience, and it helped Herb, quite frankly, survive the next 18 months, which for pancreatic cancer, stage 4, isn't bad. The other thing is, I came to Iowa. I grew up in Michigan, and I lived in New York for some years, and then I got a job out here in Iowa. And one of the nice things for me is I realized my dad is a native Iowan. Tony, or Jordan, excuse me, do you know Laverne, Iowa?
Yes, that was about 10 miles from where I grew up. Yeah.
That's where my dad's from Laverne. So anyway, brings us all back around. So thank you for sharing with us a little bit about how you came to the university and your connection there. And tell us a little bit more, though, about what you enjoy most about working at the University of Iowa Holden Cancer Center. Adam, why don't you start us this time?
Sure. So what drew me here to the University of Iowa was the collaborative nature of the faculty here. It really was and still is a unique feature of this place. I knew enough about what I knew to know that I didn't know a lot of things, and that I was going to need a collaboration and a lot of help from other scientists to be successful. And so I knew just being here that was more easily done here than at other places. People just wander around, talk about their data openly, the experiments going on in the lab at that day. That's just, it's unusual to think, but it just doesn't happen in a lot of institutions. And it really is what makes science great and what makes science move forward more quickly. And I really love that about the University of Iowa. And it's what's helped me be as successful as I've been and achieve a lot of the things I have, including starting a new graduate program here in the area of cancer biology. I have a tremendous amount of help from all the faculty here, and we collaborate to really to build and grow this graduate program. So we're doing all sorts of things here that are pretty unique to the University of Iowa, I think.
Okay. And George, how do you create an environment like that? Being the director, how do you create that environment? How do you foster that environment and keep it going at the university?
Well, I think there's a number of ways we do that. First of all, we try to recruit the right people. That we look to recruit people who are focused on our mission, which is to reduce the burden of cancer for the people we serve, and recognize that doing that as a member of a team is what we need to do if we're going to make progress. And I would take what Adam said to another level, that our collaborations are not just among scientists, but our collaborations extend across the entire university and beyond, where we have members of the Cancer Center from 6 colleges and 36 different departments. We have a fantastic relationship with what's called the Iowa Cancer Consortium, which is the statewide organization responsible for cancer control across Iowa. We work closely with the American Cancer Society, the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and we have collaborative efforts with other cancer centers around the country and indeed around the world. We keep our eye, again, on the mission. and recognize that the goal is not to hide away in your laboratory and work on your own. The goal is to make progress, and you need expertise of people from many different fields in order to make that progress move as quickly as possible. For me, that's the joy of the job, having an amazing mission and getting to work with amazing people every day.
Well, and congratulations, I can hear from both of you that how important that atmosphere is, and the fact that it exists and you continue to foster it. It makes a huge difference. Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about the perspective from the patient care, your connection with, I understand that you benefited from a lot of different programs and different therapies while you were being treated at the university. How did that work for you?
Yeah, well, it turned out great, obviously, because I'm here today. Going to, getting cancer, I think it's not like never having had it before. We all know people that have been impacted, obviously, but it's not, it's not like used car shopping or car shopping. You can't just go test drive different doctors and hospitals, and you're kind of putting your trust and faith in those doctors. And the first few places I went, the prognosis outcomes were not great. They weren't giving me a lot of options. I think they wanted to amputate my arm and take my lung out. So I said, hey, what other options do we have? And I didn't feel like we were getting very far. And I kind of just did a little research and said, what about a clinical trial? And finally, I got a referral to Dr. Moe at U of I, who specializes in melanoma. I did not even realize there was cancer specialists. I just thought, if you're an oncologist, you just, covered all cancers, and that's not the case. And Iowa, U of I being a comprehensive cancer center, which I think there's only 50 some of those across the country. And those, these are the places that are doing the research. They're collaborating. That's the key word the other two used. That was very important, and the communication with my doctors at the U of I and everybody else was just tremendous. I go back once a year now for a CT scan, and thankfully that's the point I'm at now, being over 8 years cancer free. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just obviously grateful. Like I tell people, I was literally 100 miles was the difference between being here today and not being here today. Mm-hmm. And I know even today there's been great advances in specifically melanoma and other cancers as well, as far as immunotherapy. That's the type of treatment I got, in combination with the target medication. So those options were not available the first places I went. Just made the trek to Iowa City, and thankful to be here today.
That's quite a journey you've been on. I'd like to go back to Adam and ask a little bit more about the specific research that you are conducting right now and how it's benefiting the Cancer Center.
Yeah, so even though I'm in the Department of Anatomy and Cell Biology, I'm actually a trained geneticist. And so that word you stumbled on, somatic mutation, it's just a fancy word that refers to the cells of your body, the soma. And that's the origin of cancer. And so my lab, our mission, our goal is to understand how changes in the DNA of our cells cause cancer, how they drive progression of cancer, and how they determine, most of our work now is looking at how mutations determine therapeutic response to treatment. Mm-hmm. And we have a project ongoing in the lab in the area of melanoma that actually focuses on the very drug that Jordan was treated with. And he's very fortunate to be one of the patients who's responded very strongly to this drug. Many patients respond briefly and then progress on this drug. And we're trying to understand in my lab what makes the difference between patients like Jordan and less fortunate patients who don't respond as well. And we do that by trying to understand the mutations that dictate the response to these drugs. And so that's something we're doing now. We're trying to work toward clinical trials with new medications, either FDA approved medications or pipeline medications that pharmaceutical companies may have in development and clinical trial, and try to figure out how we can reverse this progression and get better responses for patients.
I know when my partner was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, the word cancer is a pretty big word, at least to me. And there are some that are, at least from my perspective, more the cause and effect, or the outcome, I should say, is not good, especially when you're with any cancer, when you're diagnosed in stage 4. Not good. But I've always find it interesting that there's so much research being done on the individual kinds of cancer, like lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, and some of it crosses over, and some of it is, from what I can see, unique to that particular kind of cancer. Dr. George, do I have that right? Is that something that different kinds of cancer have to be approached in different ways?
Well, that is correct. But what we've also learned is that two cancers that look identical under the microscope, that occur maybe in the same part of the body, in two people who are similar, may have very different genetic causes, the type of thing that Adam studies, and will respond very differently to different treatments. So we're really learning that every cancer is unique. And the more we can understand it, the better we are at identifying the right treatment for the right patient at the right time.
Okay.
Cancer is just incredibly complex, and never going to come up with a single cure for cancer.
Right.
But what we can do is come up with treatments that are specifically effective for groups of patients based on our understanding of that cancer.
I'm intrigued by what you just said, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how things have changed over time, over the years, in terms of both research and care.
Oh, they've changed incredibly. Though many people on this call may remember the discussion of the Human Genome Project, where the goal was to identify each of the letters in the DNA in the human body, and it cost billions of dollars. Well, we're now able to do that, not just for individual patients, but actually sequence individual cells in the body and look at how, even in a single cancer, the DNA might be different from one part of the cancer to the other. So what used to take us years, we can now do in hours. So the research is moving much faster from that point of view. And this is resulting in better treatments for a lot of patients. But some cancers, our progress really has been incredibly frustrating and slow. And pancreatic cancer is one of them. We've made some progress, but not nearly as much progress as we've made in melanoma. And so we need to continue that research so we can better understand what causes those cancers and what their vulnerable spots are, and develop better approaches to ideally prevention, but also treatment. So we're making progress faster than ever before, but we still have a very long way to go.
Right. I'm going to segue a little bit into a related topic that you just addressed, and that is, funding for some of these research projects. I know I myself personally decided, in coordination with the folks from the advancement group, that I wanted to set up a fund in Herb's name to provide some research dollars. And I worked my way through it with them, and in my particular case, I decided to have a named fund. You can do it any way you want. you can do it in any organized way that works for you, with a goal or as you can. But that was the way I set it up, and I was glad that I was able to designate it, from my perspective, for cancer research, because obviously that is something special to me. So I just wanted to clarify that. Let's see. I want to sort of segue a little bit here and ask Jordan a slightly different question. Jordan, I understand that you have a business that is a way for you to give back. Tell us about that.
Yeah, good question. So last year I decided I wanted to start some protective clothing and apparel business and donate portions of profits back to the U of I for cancer research. It's called Crown Cover. We sell primarily online at crowncover.life. We're in a few local stores, but we've got hats, shirts, kids and adults, arm sleeves, neck gaiters, neck and face gaiters, and hopefully, down the road, continue to innovate some new products. But they're all UPF 50 rated, so they offer maximum sun protection. The 50 rating basically means the clothing only allows about maybe 2% of UV light through. So being a melanoma survivor, I'm excuse me, still pretty cautious out in the sun. I used to work outside a lot in college and high school. Did not wear sunscreen or cover up. Obviously, that caught up to me sooner than later. But just our mission is to not only give back to cancer research, but to promote awareness and prevention, because prevention is even more key, I think, than treatment itself. There's a lot of, I think, cancers, especially melanoma, that are so preventable, but I feel like skin cancer, even in Iowa, the Midwest, is become more prevalent for whatever reason. But so yeah, I do it on the side. It's not a full-time job, obviously, but hoping to scale up here in the next couple of years and make a bigger impact and kind of pay it forward. Without those research dollars, I wouldn't be here today. So just very important to me, and the U of I means a lot. So I want to help support that any way I can and give back.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a way for members of this, people who are listening in today with us, to learn a little bit more about your business and how they might benefit from it. At the same time, the Holden Cancer Center could benefit from it. So it's my understanding that there's going to be a way to communicate that information to folks who are listening today, so that they can take advantage of that and help the Cancer Center at the same time, help on research. Adam, tell us a little bit about how philanthropy helps you in your work.
Well, for my research, and really for so many within the Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center, it is critical. As we develop new ideas and new research directions, if they're at all different from sort of our background or areas where we've been doing active research, it can be very challenging to get grant funding through the National Institutes of Health, for example, to support that. You've got to build a lot of data, a lot of evidence that you have an idea that is worthy of funding, because the funding is completely extremely competitive. Still, I don't know, what is it, George? Probably less than a single-digit percentages of grants get funded right now. It's a very, very frustrating process still. So the philanthropy is critical for us to do the experiments that will support those grant submissions, that will bring in the dollars that we need to really translate our research into the clinic to achieve the results we're looking for patients. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we do at academic institutions like the University of Iowa and the Holden Comprehensive Cancer Center serves as the basis for drug companies as they develop new drugs that target cancer in new and different ways. They often rely on us in the academic realm to do those basic discoveries to drive the ideas and drug development that will eventually be translated into the clinical space. So okay. All of that is really reliant on philanthropic support.
And so,
follow up.
Yes, please, George, do so.
So I agree completely with Adam. Only about 1 in 10 meritorious grants that are submitted to the National Cancer Institute end up getting funded. And other funding organizations like the American Cancer Society and others are equally competitive. So having that philanthropy to get those projects started is really vital. And The most difficult part of my job is there are so many good ideas for research that many more than there are funds to support them. So I have researchers who are doing fantastic work, and we just don't have the resources to support all of them. So we have our own peer review system, where when our researchers have ideas, a group of us sit around the table and really talk about which is the best idea, which is going to have the greatest payoff for patients. And that's where we direct the resources that we have. But for me, that's the hardest part of the job, is having to say no to people who actually have great ideas that might eventually help patients because of the limited resources we have.
Yeah, and hopefully those listening to this conversation today, I know one of the things I thought about after Herb passed away was, how can I help? And so I made a good connection with the university advancement group, and that brought forth, we tossed a couple of ideas around, but we came up with something that would work for me and would help the Cancer Center. And I was grateful for that connection.
Yeah, we use those funds in a number of ways. An important one is pilot grants and seed grants that Adam was talking about. We also will use those funds sometimes to recruit faculty. If we realize that we have a hole in our team, if we need a good left fielder because we don't have one, we'll use those funds to bring someone here to Iowa to work as a member of the team. And then occasionally to purchase state-of-the-art equipment that multiple researchers would like to use that will make the research of many of our members better. We'll use those funds sometimes to purchase equipment as well. But they're vital for all three of those purposes.
Okay. And I can see the benefit. I've gotten some recent updates from the Holden Cancer Center on the field that I'm most interested in, the pancreatic cancer, and I'm invigorated by that. I'm pleased to see progress, and I'm grateful for it. Let's see. How about in the field of patient care? And we've talked a little bit about that from Jordan's perspective, excuse me. But how do you oversee that? How does that process get connected all the way to the patients? Because obviously that's what's key. The atmosphere in the clinic, I can speak from my personal experience, was excellent. The care given and the relationships with the doctors are key. But George, maybe you could speak a little bit about the clinic's involvement and about that connection and the patient care aspects that, of course, Jordan benefited from.
Sure. Well, first of all, again, it's all about the people, recruiting and retaining and supporting the best possible people who have the mission in mind is front and center. We are structured as what's called a matrix cancer center. And what that means is we're embedded fully within the university, within the hospital. And so we don't try to build a separate structure in the cancer center. We leverage the great work being done in the Department of Medicine, Department of Radiation Therapy, Department of Surgery, Department of Pathology to bring people together in patient care. And as Jordan said, we have teams that focus on different cancer types. And each of these teams then has experts from different fields. We work to help them work together so that the patient isn't being seen independently by 3 or 4 doctors who you hope happen to talk to each other by phone now and then. These teams get together in tumor boards to talk about what's the best management for each individual patient. They talk about what clinical trials need to be done. What are those new opportunities for patients with melanoma or pancreatic cancer or lung cancer? And so our job is to coordinate these teams and then to also make sure patients are able to navigate this complex system. So we have nurse navigators who are sort of the contact person for the patients and can help them be in contact, make sure they're seeing the right doctor. So it's very complex. And it's constantly changing as new treatments come along and new approaches come along. But the bottom line is we work within the institution to leverage the strengths of the entire hospital and university to give the best care possible.
Wonderful. George, we have a question that's come in our Q&A, which I think I'm going to address to you, okay? What immunotherapies are showing the greatest efficacy against bladder cancer?
Well, bladder cancer is a interesting type of cancer. Actually, one of the first immunotherapies ever developed was for bladder cancer, even though we didn't know that's how it worked. And that involves actually taking a very weak germ called BCG and putting it into the bladder. It sticks to the wall of the bladder, and then the immune system can come in, and for some patients, that results in the bladder cancer going away. We now use a more modern, we use that frequently still, but the same medication that actually I believe Jordan was treated with, called an anti-PD-1 antibody, can also work in some patients with bladder cancer. And this treatment basically strips away the ability of a cancer to hide from the immune system. The way I describe it is one of the reasons cancers can grow is they have an invisibility cloak that allows them to hide from the immune system. We figured out what that is, and we can now remove that cloak, which allows the immune system to recognize the cancer as foreign and reject it. And this treatment works at least in some patients with bladder cancer. So those are the two most active areas, I would say, for bladder cancer.
Okay. There was actually a follow-up question. I'll just tell you what that is. If wanting to avoid bladder removal, what course of radiation and/or chemotherapy is currently being recommended by the University of Iowa oncologists for bladder cancer?
Well, I've talked about the fact that we have teams that specialize in different cancer types, and I'm not a specialist in bladder cancer.
Okay.
So what I would suggest is that person, if they're not already plugged in with the bladder cancer team, see a member of that team to get the best advice possible for their particular situation.
Makes sense. Thank you. What other areas, I'm just trying to make sure that we cover all the key points here. We've talked a bit about philanthropy, and we've talked about research, and we've gotten a great perspective on what it's like to be a patient from Jordan. I would invite any questions that any participants might have. I'm just encouraging that. If you have any questions, please go ahead and submit those on the Q&A for our seminar today.
While we're waiting, I might talk a little bit about another very important part of what we do in the Cancer Center. And that's what we call community outreach and engagement. That we don't want to be isolated here in the four walls of the Cancer Center. We recognize we need to get out in the community, and we need to learn what's important to people in the community about from their point of view, what should we be working on in the Cancer Center. And we need patients and collaborators in the community in order to be able to do our research as effectively as possible. So for example, the Cancer Center has a community advisory board made up of community members who help advise us on what we're studying, how we're studying it, what areas are of greatest need in the community. And so that's a very important part of what we do as well.
I can speak to some of that personally. Before the pandemic, I was present at least one, if not two programs at the Holden Cancer Center to bring folks who are interested in providing some resources to the Cancer Center and giving us a sort of a update on what things are going on. Now, obviously, the pandemic has occurred, and that has changed all of our lives. But George, do you think that might be something in the future that might be happening again, or how it's difficult to engage people, I think, right now. So how do you see that changing in the future?
Well, I hope we keep the best of what we've learned during the pandemic, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. I think some people are able to learn things virtually and communicate virtually, and we should take advantage of our newfound skills there. But in-person programs are also incredibly valuable, and we're already getting back out into the community and meeting with people in person. So I think both approaches are really very important.
I can tell you from my perspective, the couple of times that I was able to tour and see different places at the cancer center sort of brought it to life for me and meet some folks face to face. But we've certainly figured out ways to handle it otherwise, for sure. A question, I'm going to start with Adam on this one, and then probably engage George on this one too. We're going to give George a little break for a minute here. Tell us a little bit about how the Holden approaches the treatment of rare cancers. I'm sure that's comes up quite often. How does the Cancer Center approach that?
Yeah, well, in terms of treatment, I can't really speak to that. I'm a basic scientist, so I don't have clinical training myself, but I can sort of speak to how we deal with rare cancers. So we have a very strong group here that focuses on sarcomas, and there are a huge, tremendous number of different sarcomas, but each one of them is really quite rare on its own. And this group gets together. It's a group of basic scientists, clinicians, and folks from all over, from the very basic of labs to those delivering care. And they meet frequently and hold symposia and really talk about collaborations and new ideas, ways that we can make progress in the area of treating sarcomas. And that's the best way we can, I'd say, from the research side to address rare cancers, is to collaborate across really the entire globe. To get clinical trials to happen, you have to have enough patients, and most hospitals don't have enough patients of a particular rare type of cancer to run a clinical trial. So we have to establish these really broad, complex networks to make that work happen, even at the research level, and certainly at the clinical level.
I agree with what Adam said, and I can tell you about a couple of those collaborations that we're very involved in. One of them is the Big Ten Cancer Research Consortium, and I actually just had a phone call with the cancer center directors from all the other Big Ten cancer centers this morning, where we have gotten together to do clinical trials for those rare cancers where even at a big cancer center like ours or Michigan or Ohio State, there are not enough patients to really get an answer to the question at one cancer center. So we're collaborating to do that, and we're also collaborating at the basic science level. We're part of another collaboration called the Oncology Research Information Exchange Network, or ORION, where we're combining all of the incredibly complex molecular data on the genetics that Adam works with. And we have that on over 20,000 patients from across the country that our researchers can access. And Adam actually has a project using this network that allows us to look at those rare cancers. Again, when any one cancer center doesn't have enough patients to study. And then finally, through this network, I am connected with people around the country and the world. And I do know who the world's experts are in these different rare cancers. And if we don't have the expertise here, we'll refer our patients elsewhere, where they can, or at the very least, talk on the phone about what's available for those patients. So we look at the cancers and rare cancers in a number of different ways.
Great. I can also tell you that looking at some of the Q&A, not only are we getting some questions, but we're also getting some folks who've had excellent treatment at the Cancer Center wanting to weigh in and share with us their personal stories. So that's always reassuring. Jordan, we have a question here. what message would you give to others who have been diagnosed?
Well, I think the main message would be really, advocate for yourself and don't be afraid to seek a second opinion or a third opinion or fourth. I think so many people get complacent or are simply not aware that there are better options at Holden, at the U of I. I personally know people that might go to their local hospital and it might be fine for the type of the stage of cancer they have, but I think the main message is advocate for yourself, and if you don't like maybe the first answer that you get from your clinic or doctor, if you're in Iowa, which I assume most of you are, U of I is the best place to go in the state if you have any type of cancer. So just advocate for yourself, advocate for others. If you know other people that have it, don't be afraid to talk about your experience and kind of pay it forward that way.
That's a great way for talking about what the Cancer Center meant to you, what the University of Iowa, specifically the Cancer Center, but what the University of Iowa means to you. Thank you. Okay, I'm just checking the Q&As or see what other questions we might have. Let's see. George, how about addressing some of the most, you've probably touched on this already, but the question is coming to us about innovative or nation-leading treatments Holden's doing.
I think there's a couple areas we can talk about here. And this is sort of like saying who your favorite children are. I think we have so many different areas I could talk about that I don't want anyone to feel slighted by leaving things out. But a couple areas where we have particular expertise. One is in using incredibly high doses of vitamin C. That actually is given, you can't get levels of vitamin C high enough by drinking orange juice for this. So it's actually given by vein. And we're finding that it actually can help sensitize some cancers to different types of treatment, including some very hard to treat cancers, such as brain cancer and pancreatic cancer. So we have a fantastic team that includes basic scientists and physicians working together to figure out how we can combine what we call pharmacologic doses of vitamin C with standard cancer treatments. And the clinical trials are looking promising. And so that's an area that we really are national leaders. Another area is an area I'm involved with, which involves trying to make cancers more sensitive to the immune system, basically by turning the cancer itself into a vaccine. What we do is we actually take a pretend virus and inject it into the cancer. The immune system rushes in looking for an infection. It doesn't find an infection, but it does find the cancer and it starts fighting off the cancer. And so it's a very complex process, but we call this in situ immunization. And it's showing promise in a number of different cancers. And we developed this from the very beginning all the way through the clinical trials. So those are two of the areas. And again, there are many others that are also, we're very proud of.
Okay. George, we have a question about survivorship programs. I'm not familiar with that term. Maybe you can help us with that.
Well, it's actually a new area, and it's new because it's actually we're making progress, and patients who are treated for cancer are surviving long term. Now, many of them, such as Jordan, appear to be back to living life 100% without any side effects. But some patients have lingering side effects from the cancer itself or from the treatment. How do we manage those patients? And also, how do we know how often a patient needs to get a CAT scan, for example, after they've had a cancer experience? So we have a team of people who are experts in cancer survivorship, who, once the cancer is in remission, how should they be managed? How should they be monitored for health effects of the cancer therapy? How should they be monitored to make sure the cancer is not coming back? or for the possibility of a new cancer. And so that's a relatively new field of cancer survivorship.
It's interesting. I'd not heard of that before. I'm glad to know about it. Okay, let's take a quick look here and see if we have more questions that have come to us. I think we are pretty much addressing all of them, so that's good. Again, several comments from people who've been helped by the Holden Cancer Center wanting to weigh in on the Q&A and just say thank you. So that's good too.
So maybe I'll jump in and actually ask Adam a question. So
Okay.
Adam, from a basic science point of view, what do you see as the most exciting thing that you're looking forward to in the next 5 years? What are we going to be able to do 5 years from now that we can't do today?
Well, for me, of course, I'm biased as a geneticist, but there's this new area that's really come on strong very rapidly here in the last 5 years called circulating tumor DNA. So this is a field. It turns out that tumor cells occasionally sort of spit out bits of their genome, bits of their DNA into our bloodstream, and you can actually detect it. We can detect it, draw blood, and actually do sequencing to see what sort of tumor sequences are circulating in a patient's blood. We call this a liquid biopsy. So instead of having to go in and have a surgical procedure or a punch of a tumor, you can sort of just draw some blood and get a sense of what's there. And these techniques have been developed that allow oncologists to actually survey the tumor's response to treatment almost in real time. So as the patient's getting treated, you can see the tumor sequences drop if they're responding and perhaps go away. And if you see resistance coming up, you can, if you understand the mechanisms, you can shift to a new drug and tap it back down. It's really pretty exciting stuff that's happening in some areas of oncology. But what I really want to see move forward is circulating tumor DNA as a diagnostic. So I'm actually personally participating in a clinical trial. I had my first colonoscopy this past year, and I signed up for a clinical trial where they drew blood and are trying to see if they can detect small tumors within the colon on a circulating tumor DNA panel and see how it compares to colonoscopy, with the hope that more people would go for a blood draw test rather than a colonoscopy if it was as good or maybe even better. So that clinical trial is going on now. And I think that sort of idea could move into other forms of cancer, and particularly those that are hard to detect or diagnose, like ovarian cancer, which is notoriously difficult to detect at an early stage. So maybe we can find circulating tumor DNA markers. So I'm really excited about that area.
Thank you, George, for that question. I've learned something new. I think that pretty much takes care of our questions that have come to us today. And I know I'd like to myself thank our panelists, Jordan, Adam, and George, for your participation today. And I hope that if anybody who's participating today in our seminar have questions or follow up, I'm sure there's an opportunity to communicate back with the university and get further explanation or further information. I know that's a key part, and one of the goals is to be able to keep this conversation going. So unless somebody else has something they want to add, I would say we'll wrap up for today. And